Hello, everyone, and welcome to my video interview. This kind of series that I've been doing around interviewing psychics and what it's like to live with intuitive psychic abilities and to really kind of normalize this way of moving through the world. My name is Nancy Rebecca, and I am a registered nurse, but I have also been working as a clairvoyant psychic for 25 years now. I teach intuitive and psychic development. And initially, when I began this work, Spirit wanted me 25 years ago to just a very simple instruction to help you to remember that you are a spirit having a human experience. And then over time, that really evolved into normalizing this more, kind of bringing it out of the closet. So I actually got an office and hung my shingle out for everybody to see. I got a teaching center about 7 years ago, right on the busy corner, so that people could just see how normal it can be. And now it's evolved into that being intuitive and being psychic are just very normal qualities that we can have. And so some people choose to develop those. So I want to give a warm welcome to Dan Bucci, and that I'm going to be asking questions today. So welcome, Dan. Thanks so much for being willing to come on this call with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I've got a list of questions that I'm curious about, and I pretty much ask similar questions of everyone that I have interviewed and that I will be interviewing, because I think people can really relate to some of the things that you have to say, and I know you've got a really unique view on things. So I've really never really sat down and kind of heard your view, so I'm excited about that. So question number one. Did you always know that you were sensitive to unseen energies as a child, or did you come to this awareness later in life? And this little extra bit that I wanted to add was it something that your family talked about or that you were kind of exposed to with your family? So I'd love to hear your story around that.
Yeah, so I think when I was younger, in the child and into my teenage years, I wouldn't say I thought I was psychic, but I certainly felt that I had some interesting, like, just intuitive senses, right? And one thing that always came up, especially as I was getting a little older in my teenage years, was like, I just seemed to know what was going on with people. And my friends would come to me for advice and seek out kind of my opinion on stuff, and it was usually around like their interactions with other people, and I could just tell like what was going on with that other person. Like, like in high school, it's like, well, does so and so like me and this and that, and you're like, of course they do. And it's like, I could just see like these tendencies in people, and I kind of could tell what was going on in their personal lives too without really like prying. I just kind of understood like when someone was having problems or someone was feeling really good. It's just like I could see energy in people, and I thought that was just what everybody could do. That I didn't realize that was like an intuitive ability, but it turns out it's like the more I started sharing that stuff, the more people would be like, it's like, how do you know? It's like, you just know. So yeah, and I described it as I started like honing in on it in high school. It was like, I know people. Like, I just generalized that. I know people. I know what's going on with people. And then like, as I got a little older in my 20s, when I got my first job out of college, I'm an engineer. So I'm a very, my profession's very left brain, very logical. But in my very first job, it was like the first month in, and I remember talking to my mentor at the time, and I told him, like, he asked me like, well, did you do the calculation? I'm like, I didn't, I just know it's going to work. And he's like, how do you know? I'm like, I'm a gut feel engineer. That's like,
Okay.
that blew he couldn't understand what I meant by that. Like, what is a gut feel engineer? And it's like, well, I just know that stuff works. And he's like, well, you gotta prove it. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So like my whole early career, I could just design stuff and know it was going to function. I didn't really need a lot of backup. I could just see stuff. So, but I thought that was just like, well, can't everybody do this? So so like that felt pretty normal in my life. But as I've trained with you and honed in my abilities, I realized like, oh, that's normal for me. It's not normal for everyone. And that has actually was my intuitive senses coming through at a younger age. I just didn't know they were intuitive senses.
Yeah.
And so to answer your second question, was this something my family discussed? Yeah, it's I think this energy is definitely present in my family. And again, no one's ever like formally honed in on it, or at least when I was a child. But my mom certainly has mental telepathic capabilities. She's always displayed those. My mom's always been a vivid dreamer where she has ancestors visiting her. My grandmother on my dad's side used to tell us how she was flying in her dreams. So she was consciously astral projecting. Wow. And she described it exactly. I learn about astral projecting now, and the story she told us was exactly what she was doing. She was having out of body experiences in her sleep when her astral body was traveling around. So there's a lot of this energy in my family. It's just no one ever really formally honed in on it to the point where they could use it in their day-to-day lives and more control it. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it kind of leads into my next question. And for some reason, I keep wanting to kind of pull your family in here. So this is making a little bit more sense. So my question is, what inspired you to choose to actually develop your skills, maybe kind of take them to the next level? What was I going to ask you in relationship to does your family know that you developed them, and how do they feel about that?
Yeah. What inspired me? That's a hard question. I think, back about a year and a half ago, I really actually started dabbling in this stuff a little bit. Maybe it really started about 3 years ago. I started doing men's group work, and that dabbled in some spiritual stuff. There's a good friend of mine leads men's group work, and he's worked with you guys prior, and has worked with Yvonne, and that kind of got me introduced to this. And then he works with Elder Malidoma Somé, and he started bringing Malidoma to Tacoma to speak. And I went to Intuitive Mind and listened to Malidoma a couple of times, and I think that really piqued my interest. And then kind of like a year and a half ago, everything just exploded. Like I had my very own spiritual awakening. But I can't say what was really the trigger, other than there was, I don't know, it just happened. Like things just clicked, and I really got into spirituality and spiritual stuff. And that was the point where I was like, I knew I needed to work with you and hone these abilities. And I had a reading with you as well, where you told me like I was hiding in a cave, and I needed to rise into my soul, my spirit was begging me to rise into my power. My ancestors were tired of laying the path for me, and that really kicked me a little bit to be like, okay, I can do this work. And so that's kind of what inspired me to get into it. And literally, I'd say a month after really the doors blew open for me, I was signed up for Psychic Mastery. I just knew I needed to do it. I knew that was the program that was going to be what I needed to do to open me up more. And really, what it did, it honed my abilities, and it gave me answers and clarity around what was really going on with me and how did that happen. And then, to answer the other question, my family does know about it. I've done readings on family members, and I do describe this work to them. And it's not uncommon in my family. Again, my aunt on my mom's side has done Reiki training. My mom and my sister both are doing Reiki, or have done Reiki training, and do Reiki healings on others. And there's a lot of actual similarities in the tools, especially doing around symbol work and energy healings, that Reiki parallels with this intuitive mind tools. So we talk a little bit about that. And my sister, it was crazy. She had my sister's spiritual activation happened within 3 or 4 months of mine, and
Wow.
independent of each other. We hadn't really even talked about it on that level, and all of a sudden one day she just starts talking to me about it. I'm like, yeah, this all happened to me like 3 or 4 months ago. So
Wow. Wow.
so yeah, it's definitely strong in our family, and it's not a secret what I do, and maybe I
Yeah.
don't get into the depths of it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not hidden. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because my sense is as I'm talking to you right now, I could really feel that ancestral presence around you, your family's and presence around you. So there is this sense of a more kind of expansive movement within your family. But I want to just go back and ask you, because I do remember that time where you had your kind of big opening. And I do know in psychic mastery, it really helps kind of create a container for you to explore and learn to develop your own abilities. But what I remember about that time talking to you was just the synchronicities. And I know it's a big story, but where I really wanted you to talk to the kind of the viewing audience is the significance of synchronistic events that happened in your life that you knew, I can't deny this any longer.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of them. I think the biggest one was I was out running one day, and I had asked, I was like, I was very frustrated, and I had asked him, like, I really need, like, I had asked, just praying, like, I need something to tell me what to do with my life right now, because it's not where I want it to be. And I went for a run, and I saw an RV pull out. Um, and as soon as it turned onto the road, I got the words before I saw it. I got the words in my head. I heard "follow the spirit," and as this RV pulled out, it was "spirit" was written in big letters on the back of it, driving down 46th Street in North Tacoma, and I was like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
um, and early in the psychic mastery program, I had a lot of very similar experiences. With with readings I had done, and then seeing symbols in the like minutes to hours later, and in my environment. Like there was one time you had asked me to do a reading, asked the group to do rose readings about hope, and so I did a reading on the concept of just hope, and I literally went to downtown Tacoma for lunch, and I did this reading that had all these messages around hope, and it was like, I remember it was like, what does hope feel like? And it's like, you look up, it's that feeling of warmth on your face when the sun hits you. And I go to downtown Tacoma, and there's this mural, and it's literally describing like the warmth of the sun bringing you hope. And I was like, huh?
Wow.
And so, yeah, so it's all those little things where you're like, they're just validations
Yeah.
of you're on the path.
Yeah, I've often talked about, because I've traveled a lot in the past, and I noticed that when I'm traveling, I feel like I'm tapped into the magic of life. But when I'm home, I didn't feel that same thing. And I asked Spirit one day, and Spirit said, "Well, magic is still around you even when you're home, but you get in your routine, your head's down. I've got to go to the store and get milk. I've got to go to the office, and let me stop and get a Starbucks first." Like, you've got your head down and you're not paying attention to the magic around it. So that's what it sounded like Spirit was really illuminating all the magic of life around you.
Yes,
So yeah,
absolutely.
thanks for sharing that. So when I teach intuitive and psychic development, most people who are familiar with intuition, they might know they're a feeler or a knower, or like for me, I'm predominantly a seer. I can see energy fields, or I may, be clairaudient, someone who hears. What would you say is your predominant style, or do you really tap into all of those abilities?
I definitely have two predominants, and they're probably both about equal, but I'm a knower and a seer for sure. Um, and the knowing is probably my predominant, and it's the one that I was most tapped into before I honed these abilities. The
Mhm.
seeing has started to come along as a really strong second. And I think I think one thing people get hung up with, and whether you're doing psychic work or whether you're doing whatever work you might be doing, people get hung up on visualization of stuff because humans are our most dominant physical sense is sight, right? That is the most honed human sense. So I feel like most people, they really want to see visual things, and I was the same way, but I didn't really have a lot of I'll call it coherent visuals early on, but that's definitely ramped up and developed as I've done this work. So I predominantly rely on my knowing and seeing when I'm doing this work, whether it be for myself or doing other readings. I do from time to time get some. I do from time to time get all the other tools too. I'll hear stuff. It's definitely not predominant. I will feel changes in temperature, or vibrations in my body or vibrations in my environment, and from time to time I will taste and smell, but those are all pretty rare, and usually when those things come through, they have some pretty strong and particular meaning around them, or they're really reinforcing something that I'm hitting on in my knowing or my seeing, and it's like, you really need to make a strong point of this because you're getting these other senses that you don't normally get. Awesome. And that's never been wrong in a reading for people.
Wow. So you did develop your abilities. You used them before, just in life in general. You did develop your abilities. You do offer private readings for people. And yet one of the point that I always want people to know is our abilities are there more than just doing readings for other people and tapping into spirit and getting the wisdom. That I use my skill and ability every day. So, and what is a way that you really tap into your skill and ability? You're not doing a reading for somebody else. You're not doing a reading for yourself, but somewhere else in your life that, that people might find interesting, or it might surprise people.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I use the most basic tools of this stuff every single day of my life. And the one I find honestly the most helpful is the concept of we call it grounding, golding, present timing, but I'll simplify that for people who don't know what it means. It's basically holding something sacred. It's your ability to take something in your world and be like, this is important to me and sacred to me, and this is important enough where I'm going to dedicate some energy to you're blessing it, for lack of a better word. Blessing has religious connotation, but still it's holding something in space for something, or holding something sacred. So I use those tools every single day on the stuff that is important for me, whether it be my house or my workplace. And ever since I've started doing that technique to, like, my workplace is a great example. Going into psychic mastery, I had a lot of anxiety around my job. I really wasn't into it. I was kind of disengaged, but I did good enough to, where nobody really hassled me, and I wasn't in threat of losing my job. But I had some issues, and me and my boss didn't get along really well. And as I started using these simple tools of just grounding, golding, and present timing my workplace, I literally started to see the environment around me change from negativity, and and it started to, the whole energy vibe started to uplift, and it really got to the point where it was like, and then all the things, like, I wanted more flexibility, I wanted to work from home and stuff like that, and then this is crazy, the pandemic hits, and and that, as weird as it is, that was like the tool that was needed to break open all these flexible workplace options that my company resisted. And so I'm like, part of it is I manifested that through these techniques. And then my boss retired like 9 months later, and it's like a surprise retirement. And so all the things that were giving me struggles at work kind of just suddenly were gone. So that's like one example. And then I use it a lot in my running. So I race direct. I help a good friend out. We run race companies, and I literally use that same technique. I will do rose readings on events. I'll do healings on events, and the vibration and the energy at those events that we've had has just been unreal compared to before. It's just everything goes smoothly, everybody's happy, things
And
just
these are
work,
not just
things
like
just
little
work out.
events. These aren't just
Yeah,
little events. You do big running events.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's my go-to tool, but again, and I use a lot of the other techniques anywhere else in my life. I think one other one I'll share is like, I was someone who, I would get really thrown, when my emotions got worked up, like
Oh, yeah.
really, really go into a tailspin to the point of, upset stomach and uncontrolled breathing and just, pacing, stressed out, stuff like that.
It'd
And
be
I've
kind of
learned
like a
how to,
panic attack or
yeah, a panic attack, I'd call it like a mild to moderate panic attack. It probably was, and I just didn't call it that.
yeah.
Getting really angry, and I've learned how to just, I can feel when it's coming and welling up, and I have these tools now where I know how to just let that wave pass through, and keep it grounded so that it doesn't throw my body off anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I always say, for me, when I get in those emotional states, there's a couple things. I don't want to wear it for the next 3 days. I don't want to be
Yep.
eating it for the next 3 days because nobody else is going to be wearing it or eating it, but I am. And I've got things I want to do. I want to enjoy life. So yeah, learning to use the tools, because there's a wisdom to that reactiveness. There's a wisdom to that anger that wants to come up. And so, yeah, these tools do teach you how to kind of tap in, hear what your body's trying to express. So, yeah, I like that point. Thank you very much about that. Now, what's the biggest, and I love this question, what's the biggest misconception that you had or other people have had about psychics that you would like to speak to?
Yeah, this one, and I tell all my clients to come to me this one. The biggest misconception I had is that being psychic and being intuitive is about the future, and it's not. It's about the present. That is probably the number one misconception that's floating around there about psychic and work and energy work, and it's like trying to solve your future problems that don't exist, right? Because there's no problem that can exist in the future. So,
Yeah.
so for people that want to, and I'm very clear about that when people come for readings. It's one of the first things I say. I said, this is not about what's going to happen to you. This is not about what your future holds. This is about what's going on for you in this very present moment right now. And it's really a snapshot of your energy field. And these are things that are going to shed light and illumination on what's going on with you today, so that you can decide what do you want your path forward to be, because it's 100% in your hands. It's not, there's no preordained that I'm psychic, I'm going to tell you that, well, and yeah, you're going to meet the love of your life in 3 months down on Point Ruston, right? It's like, that's not what this is, because the more I've done this work and I've explored around this, it's like, I call it the threads of the universe, of threads of time. It's like, there's this singular moment that I'm looking at, and the threads of possibility off of that moment are actually infinite. And you are the one who holds the key to decide where do you want to go. So
Yeah,
that's the number one misconception.
That is a number one misconception. And so often I know, we teach in the Psychic Mastery Program, it's very much the present moment, but you still get to ask that question, why don't I have a relationship? I'm lonely. And that's a big question a lot of people ask. And so then the way that it's approached as a psychic is more of, well, let's take a look at, why you can't get there right now. What's going on in your life that is not allowing a relationship to come to you? So you're staying in the moment. It's not like, well, you'll have a relationship 3 years down the way and you move on. It's like, let's look at those underlying blocks of energy.
Yes,
So
that's exactly the blocks
the
of energy.
relationship you want. Yeah, beautiful. Yep. So you are being very public in this interview about your psychic abilities, but are you public, or do you tend to keep them private?
Oh yeah, that's that's a good question. Yeah, I think it depends on the circle. I've um, it's not something I share openly in my my work environment. I not quite sure how well going in there and talking about this stuff, it doesn't fit well with what the worldview I think that most people have. But on the same token, that's probably something in me too. I bet I could talk to a lot of people about this at work and people would find it interesting. um, Amongst my friends, most people know what I do. Amongst my family, most people know what I do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I probably haven't been as super open about it on social media, but I've been open enough about it where I've told people I have a website and I've used my personal pages to throw my services out there, but only when I first released it. It's something I've been working on. How do I integrate this into my daily or my social media work? How do I bring the things I learn more into the world? And that's something I do work on. Although I'm starting to get more and more hits that 6 months ago I would meditate on it. It's like it's not really time to share a lot right now. And now as I get in,
Yeah.
I'm starting to get more information that it's like you need to start putting yourself out. It's time to start putting yourself out there more. And
Yeah.
regardless of the feedback that you're going to get, and some of the stuff you're going to say is going to unsettle people, and some of it might just piss people off too.
Yes, and yeah, people, yeah, they respond and react in all kinds of different ways. And I heard a message today that about being on stage, don't play just to the front row. That there's a bigger audience. Speak to the whole audience when you're speaking about intuitive psychic abilities, not just the front row of people who might be naysayers. But I have this other question for you, and this is kind of how Spirit wanted to bring it through, is if somebody offered you $1 million to walk away, and maybe these days $1 million isn't that much money, but maybe it was $1 billion to put your intuitive psychic ability, those abilities spiritually that you use to navigate life, would you take the money? Would you give up your abilities?
I
And
wouldn't.
why not?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, because I mean, it's funny you asked that question, because I do a lot of meditative work. Or I like to look at global things too, and that's what I kind of do between work, my spare time of meditating. I work on myself probably about 60 to 70% of the time, and that other 30 to 40%, I like to focus on global concepts, or I call it, the concepts of collective consciousness. I'm really interested in how consciousness works in a human world, and even particularly on how it goes, and on how do humans function unconsciously? Like, where does collective consciousness take over to the point where it's doing this thing that we're all looking at like, what's going on? It's like, well, because this thing's taken on a mind of its own, kind of like we've created this, I call it the Zerg. You've created this Zerg. It's this this uncontrollable force. But so money is one of those things I look at from time to time. And like, yeah, it's like, yes, I wouldn't take $1 billion, because I've come to a lot of realizations around money. It's like an interesting tool, but it's not something I aspire to have more than I need of at this point in my life. And so I'm super happy and comfortable with what I have right now. And I've even done work, like, it's like, if somebody went and took all this away, someone said, well, we're taking your house tomorrow and you're going out on the street. It's like, I'll figure something out. I can like, yeah. I could live with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the abilities, it's like priceless.
Yes.
I thought about this the other day, and it's just like, I don't even know how I would live the life that I have now without my spirit kind of in the front seat of the car, kind of helping to guide me. I went for a walk. I was up at 6 this morning walking, and I have a friend that walks with me. And I said, I feel like I'm in the car with my parents or parent, and we're going on a road trip, an adventure, but they don't want to tell me it's a surprise. And I'm all excited because I just know that when I get there, I'm going to have a lot of fun and I'm going to enjoy it. And that's what these tools do for me. I don't have to know the answers. I don't have to know where I'm going. Just kind of like you said, you know, as an engineer, I just know this is going to work and I trust and have faith in that. So yeah, I couldn't, if I took that away and had to go back to always mentally processing things, that would be torturous
Yep.
for me.
Yeah, I spent the first 37 years of my life very much mentally processing things.
Yeah. So you have mentioned several times in this interview that you are actively doing readings. So do you have a website? Could you name the website? I will include it in the kind of, when I put this up on YouTube, I'll include it so that people can follow it. But are you open to seeing new people and doing readings?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my website is wonderlandliving.net. So that's Wonderland, like Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, I'm definitely open. I have a I have a scheduling tool on the website, so people can excuse me, book readings right through there.
Beautiful.
And I keep it kind of limited availability wise, since I do work full time, but I have evening spots open. And I'll also do distance readings and healings, which is basically we're not live either on Zoom or in person. I started resuming in person stuff again. But I'll do one where I just record one as well if people are interested in not sitting down for an hour face to face. I can just tap in and you get an emailed audio recording. So I do both of those things. Yep.
So do you have an ideal client that you like to work with?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting. The type of clientele that's been attracted to me has been pretty consistent, and they kind of do fit my mold of the ideal client. I think it's right now, and I've been working with people who are I call them curious. It's people who are probably on the cusp of having some spiritual breakthroughs of their own. They're maybe not at the point where they're looking to develop them further, or they're really diving in deep, but they're awake. They've got the itch, and a lot of people have come to me that have the itch, and they're just looking for information, or they're looking for some clarity, or they're trying to bring their life into better alignment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, it's definitely, I get this more newcomer, curious type crowd. Most people haven't had any energy work or energy readings done before, or very limited experience. And I like working with that level because I mean, it's where I was not too long ago. So it's familiar to me. And I think, yeah, and we'll see how that evolves over time. But for now, it's definitely people who've got the curiosity itch.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things early on when I had my out-of-body experience. It should not have been that difficult for me to find help. And that was something that really stuck with me. And that's why I am so public and so out there, because I know there are a lot of people out there just like you and just like me. And it should be easy for anyone who would want a reading to be able to have access, or just simply just to, be able to have these conversations without discomfort and fear. So thank you so much, Dan, for helping me take this kind of normalizing to another level. Although I'm sure you would say there's nothing normal about me, but in actuality, there's a lot that's very very approachable, and you're always you're very inviting. That's the one thing I've really noticed about you. I've noticed that you just have this intense curiosity. I also notice you have a love for people. You like knowing what kind of makes them tick. And so I think we are just all so blessed to have you in the world. So thank you again for joining me today. I so appreciate you taking this time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay. Let me just